Basketball is a league defined by cycles. Every team will eventually face a downturn, a prolonged stretch of losing that is necessary for the franchise to rebuild its core and re-establish a winning identity. We saw this reality on full and agonizing display just 2 years ago when the Detroit Pistons set the benchmark for modern futility, tying the all-time record with a brutal 28 consecutive losses, a streak that made them the undisputed symbol of incompetence in the sport at that moment. The conversations at the time were predictable, with everyone from the biggest sports analysts to casual fans proclaiming that team as potentially the worst collective unit ever assembled in the history of professional basketball. A narrative that was, in many ways, an understandable and emotional reaction to witnessing such an unprecedented and prolonged skid. Yet, the current reality in the nation's capital, watching the utter collapse of the Washington Wizards organization, forces us to re-examine that entire debate, compelling us to seriously consider the unsettling notion that the Detroit team, for all its public humiliation and record-breaking failure, was merely a necessary waypoint on the road to a far greater and far more insidious form of organizational catastrophe. The Pistons, despite their abysmal record, could at least point to a beacon of hope, a true franchise engine in Cade Cunningham, a player capable of scoring, facilitating and carrying the burden of an offense, demonstrating flashes of the high-level talent required to anchor a future contender. They were a team that was losing despite having a future foundation, a team whose struggles could be partially attributed to a lack of surrounding pieces and a bit of genuine bad luck, as evidenced by a loss to the Celtics during that streak, where they were down 20 points before forcing overtime. Now, in the year 2025, the Wizards find themselves in a drastically worse position. A team that does not just lack talent, but lacks structure, lacks identity, and most critically, lacks a single definitive franchise cornerstone to build around. A reality that makes their current 1-13 record and their active 12-game losing streak feel far more ominous than any recent historical parallel. The Wizards are not just losing. They are sinking to the bottom of the league with a point differential that, when extrapolated over a full season, is on pace to eclipse every single mark of historical struggle, including the worst margins of defeat per game that were set during the Pistons' notorious slide. The defense is an absolute sieve, ranking dead last in nearly every meaningful category, while the offense is stagnant, relying on ISO ball and ranking near the bottom in assists, a stark contrast to any team that hopes to compete in the modern, fluid, and movement-heavy NBA, say NBA. The core reason this iteration of the Wizards is not just a historically bad team, but perhaps the worst managed team in recent memory, can be traced directly back to the catastrophic errors made during the prolonged and painful conclusion of the Bradley Beal era. A period that laid the organizational groundwork for the current, complete systemic failure. The decision to grant Beal a no-trade clause was a self-inflicted wound of monumental proportions, effectively ceding all future trade leverage to a player who, despite his talent, was clearly never going to lead the franchise to a championship, resulting in a return package that was universally panned as one of the worst star trades of the last decade. But the compounding failures did not stop there. The front office then doubled down on retaining Kyle Kuzma, extending him a significant contract that, at the time of the 2024 trade deadline, immediately undercut the team's ability to trade him for maximum value. Kuzma, while a capable scorer, was perhaps the only remaining major trade asset the team possessed, and by failing to move him at the absolute peak of his value, when other contenders, like the Dallas Mavericks, were desperate for his versatile scoring, the Wizards essentially signed away their chance at accelerating a necessary rebuild. This gross mismanagement of key veteran assets is only half the story, as the franchise has demonstrated an equally baffling inability to properly develop and utilize the young talent they did manage to acquire through the draft, turning promising players into valuable commodities for their competitors. Consider the case of Rui Hachimura, a lottery pick who, after showing flashes of his offensive capability in Washington, was shipped out for minimal returns, only to become a crucial and effective rotational piece for a contending Los Angeles Lakers team. thriving in the exact type of complementary role that the Wizards could never envision for him. The pattern is repeated even more jarringly with Denny Avdija, another high draft pick who, in this alternate timeline, has been flourishing in Portland, showcasing the kind of versatile defensive and playmaking skills that many projected for him. Potentially even winning the Most Improved Player award in a situation where he is given the usage and consistency that was never afforded to him in Washington. His time with the Wizards was defined by a perpetually shifting role, constantly hampered by the presence of high-usage veterans like Russell Westbrook and the later, doomed-to-fail quasi-contender roster built around Beal, Kristaps Porzingis and Kuzma Singh. And ensuring that Avdija's development was stunted and his confidence perpetually undermined. The Wizards' refusal to commit to a full, uncompromising rebuild, holding on to the delusion of being a competitive play, in team long after the competitive window had slammed shut, is the single greatest factor in their current plight. They drafted young players like Avdija and Hachimura with the intention of developing them, yet they immediately surrounded them with wing, now mercenaries and coaches designed to maximize short-term veteran success, a direct and irreconcilable contradiction that sacrificed the future for the present. The front office's decision-making process appears to have been guided entirely by a fear of alienating the fan base with a tank, instead prioritizing mediocrity over potential greatness, resulting in a franchise that is now neither competitive nor appealing to watch. This organizational confusion has created a culture where the only consistency is losing, a problem compounded by the fact that the team currently lacks the primary engine, the foundational star that even the historically bad Pistons possessed in Aaron Cunningham. Making the road back to relevancy seem miles longer than it should be. The key difference between a bad luck team like the Pistons and this Wizard squad is that Detroit at least had a core piece to trade or to build around once the dust settled. Whereas Washington's cupboard is bare of both top-tier talent and readily available, high-value trade assets. When one analyses the current state of the roster, the lack of an elite playmaker is striking, with even the team's leading assist man posting numbers that are among the lowest for a team leader in the entire league, indicating a severe case of stagnant, uninspired, and predictable offensive sets. This slow, isolation-heavy offense, combined with their league-worst defense, is the perfect recipe for becoming, as the competitor's video correctly assessed, the most unwatchable product in professional basketball. A fact borne out by their consistent dead last ranking in attendance figures year after year. The fans have already made their vote, and they are choosing to stay home, recognizing that what the Wizards are offering is not even the entertaining kind of bad team that focuses on developing its young guns, but rather a profoundly depressing and uninspired roster designed to lose. Quietly. The tragic irony is that while a weak draft class in 2024 has actually yielded a few promising players for the Wizards, such as Alex Sarr and Keshawn George, their presence can only mildly offset the deeper fundamental flaw. A franchise that has consistently demonstrated a unique talent for crushing the potential of any young player who walks through their doors. They have a blueprint of failure, one that starts with overvaluing mid-tier veterans, attaches crippling contracts to them, and concludes with trading away future stars for pennies on the dollar. A cycle of incompetence that has landed them in this current, historically low point. The Washington Wizards are not just losing, they are redefining what it means for an NBA franchise to fail, and the evidence suggests that this might actually be the worst, most structurally flawed organization in the history of the league.